Welcome back to AP Lit Unpacked, a place where we break down literary works so you can not only better understand them for your grade 12 AP English classes, but you can apply the skills you learn into the rest of your life. My name is Summer Suick, and today we're going to be breaking down the interpretation of three amazing literary works and see how they all connect. The first one is If by Rudyard Kipling. The second is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. And the third, my personal favorite, is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. My interpretation of the poem is that the possibilities that are available to humanity are endless when we embody three core virtues and balance them with their contrasting virtues. These three core virtues are perseverance, sensibility, and humility. The first one, perseverance, is specifically illustrated by the quote, "If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are done." This quote really illustrates the fact that when a society works harder and embodies this disciplined, resilient characteristic, they're able to surpass other nations, or as an individual, you're able to possibly be more successful than your neighbors. The second quote is, "If you can keep your head all about you when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you." This one is really about temperance and prudence, being able to control your own emotions and make a sensible, logical decision when everybody is blaming their problems on you or they're maybe twisting your words. So this one is really just about being able to be sensible and make right choices in the right state of mind, even if the people around you aren't doing that. And then the third one is, "If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, and walk with kings, nor lose your common touch." This one is saying that if you can walk with crowds and be in society where maybe their values or their norms are less than what you would like to be, but you still hold your own values and your own strong virtues, then you're going to be really strong and really resilient in a society. The second part is saying that if you are hanging out with people that are really rich and really successful, some people that would make them arrogant. But he's saying that the most powerful thing you can do is to keep your humility and keep your ability to relate with other people even when they have less than you. That's going to make you really successful in the long run. And what all these three things are kind of showing is they're showing that the author is trying to help an individual embody these characteristics and be a more well-rounded, successful person. Specifically, the author is writing this to his son, as he says in the last line. But it's also a message to British society or civilization to embody this kind of ideal British man so that Britain can succeed as a nation. There are many elements of the poem that reflect my own mindset and way of thinking because I am a visionary and an innovator, meaning sometimes I'll wonder how my actions might impact the outcomes in my life. So for example, if I have a test coming up, I'll wonder, well, what if I still set a high standard for myself, but I don't let my grade consume me, which is something that I often get into the mindset of thinking. So when I ask myself these questions of how can I adapt or what would happen if I made this change, then it's kind of allowing me to explore possibilities just like the poem is doing with those repetition of if statements. For instance, in line 9, Rudyard says, "If you can dream and not make dreams your master." This line demonstrates a similar thought process or approach to life that I often try to implement by asking myself these similar questions. This line is also hinting at those balance of virtues. He's trying to balance the dreamer in him who has big goals and big ambitions, but also staying appreciative and being grateful for his everyday life, which also reflects the mindset that I try to embody. So now, the moment you've all been waiting for. How do these three very different literary works come together and connect? We have If, which is a poem from the 1800s, Crucible, which is a book about Salem witchcrafts, and Hamlet, about a Denmark prince. And the reason these three works connect is through a shared literary theme. The theme I'm specifically talking about today is McCarthyism. So this term refers to the intentional ruining of someone's reputation through baseless claims, meaning they're made on no evidence. purpose is often to shift the blame off of oneself onto someone else. If has an overarching theme of McCarthyism because the author explores how to protect yourself from a society that is driven by McCarthyism. The same quote that we explored earlier, saying that if you can keep your logic and your sensibility when everyone else is going crazy and trying to blame things on you, which is the definition of McCarthyism, if you can stay sensible, then you're going to be able to think critically in those times of chaos and crisis and fake news so that you can make the proper decision to go forward and hopefully lead society to do the same. He also advises, deal not in lies, and bear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. These quotes are illustrating that same theme of advising against McCarthyism. Here he's urging the readers not to follow into this blaming of others and ruining others' reputation, and he's allowing the readers to be aware and to gain the strength to protect themselves when people are using your own words against you, or when people are trying to lie and twist the truth to make others look bad. The Crucible, as I'm sure we know, has a more obvious theme of McCarthyism, because characters are constantly blaming others without any evidence to shift the blame from themselves. For example, when the town becomes suspicious of Abigail regarding the witchcraft and dancing in the forest, she immediately says that Tituba, who is her maid from Barbados, made her do it. In Hamlet, the theme of McCarthyism is present in the sense that Hamlet blames his mother and uncle for his own madness and emotional turmoil, when in reality, he must take responsibility for his own reaction to his father's death and his mother's marriage. This is evident in scene 3, when Hamlet tells his mother that she is the cause of his depression, and the consequences are evident based on Ophelia's suicide and the death of the rest of the characters. Shifting back to the poem If, I want to look at how this poem changed my thinking and impacted my literary skills. So first of all, this poem really challenged me to interpret the ultimate message or purpose of a work when multiple themes are present. So, like I'm applying McCarthyism to those 3 plays, there are tons more themes such as socioeconomic, family, imperialism, personal growth. There's so many themes that could be applied to this poem and many others, but it takes a certain amount of analyzing structures, looking at literary devices, and background information on the author to truly discern what their core message was. So here, I employed my critical thinking skills to discern that Rudyard's ultimate message was to his son and to his readers to urge them to develop the perseverance, humility, and sensibility, as well as the virtues that contrast those ones. And my interpretation is that his ultimate purpose was to serve his son and community to build their own characters so that he could build a stronger British nation, leading to colonialism. Next, I really developed my interpretation of the artistic, historical, and thematic elements in the poetry. So specifically looking at the style, tone, and mood that the author is using to kind of discern what the main theme is, like I mentioned before, and also looking at the historical context of when was the poem made, when was the author born, what was happening in society at that place in that time. And then lastly, I really developed my annotating skills in poetry, being able to determine the poetic feat and determine the... Next, let's move on to The Crucible. So The Crucible is a famous 1953 play written by Arthur Miller, which illustrates the Salem witch trials that occurred in Massachusetts in the 1600s. Okay, I know that's a mouthful. So it is a play written in the 1900s about the witchcraft trials that happened in the 1600s. So it really highlights the use of McCarthyism, a corrupt legal system, and religious extremism to create mass hysteria around this assumed witchcraft that people thought was going on. The Crucible connects to my own personal life because sometimes I can simply believe the first thing I hear, as mainstream media teaches us to do these days. However, after reading The Crucible, I'm learning to think for myself, consolidate multiple sources, and form my own evidence-based views on specific topics. The Crucible applies to our modern-day media more than ever. For instance, when we see something on the news, we immediately assume it to be fact. But if we turn on another channel, the point of view could be entirely different. Think about CNN versus Fox News. You're going to get completely different subjective views based on the situation and based on the politics, the government, the parties involved. And there are so many situations we see this not only on the news but on social media, in our own personal lives, speaking to a different family member and a different friend. And there's so many conflicting views, but we really need to discern where is the evidence and form our own somewhat objective opinion based on the data that is actually present. This leads into how the Crucible impacts my thinking, because it has taught me to identify those biases in the media and from the people I talk to. It has allowed me to change my mindset to think more critically about the information that is portrayed to me. And it's also changed the way that I think about the victim and villain of the story. When we are given any fictional book or a non-fictional real event that's happening in society, there's oftentimes someone who is painted as the protagonist, someone who's painted as the antagonist. But the truth is that in order to discern whether a person was really evil, we need to understand their motive, their side of the story, and all the information surrounding the event. So for example, even in a court setting, if someone is accused of murder, we really need to make sure that we're not just listening to the witness and what they're saying is happening, but we're also listening to the accused and their side of the story and forming an objective opinion based on the facts and not based on one side. As well as developing that holistic and critical thinking approach to looking at multiple situations, I've also gained important skills such as responsibility and my communication and acting skills, as well as my ability to interpret the purpose of a work. So firstly, I developed my responsibility by learning to take accountability for my own actions and forgive myself and forgive others for any mistakes that they've made. What really taught me this was at the end of the story, when Mary Warren should confess and be honest, she blames all the witchcraft on Proctor, saying that he is the devil and that he has forced her to lie. And what they're both doing is using McCarthyism to ruin someone else's reputation in order to protect themselves, because they are so afraid. They're so afraid of the consequences of what might happen if they open up to the truth, that they create a spiral of disasters, and the result is that the consequences are astronomically worse than if Mary Warren and Abigail were just to confess of whatever so-called witchcraft, which is not really witchcraft, that they had done. And we see this in the end because it doesn't even work out for Abigail and Mary, because all of society knows what they have done, and they need to run away and they need to try and escape anyway. So I definitely won't be blaming anyone else, even if it's the smallest thing. And as well as that, I've also really developed my oral communication skills and my acting skills. So when reading that text in front of a class, it's really helped my pronunciation and just my ability to kind of comprehend the words and the sentences as I'm reading aloud. And then my acting skills, getting to act out Mary Warren and trying to embody that sadness and that fear that she was really coming from, I think really helped my presentation and my acting skills as a whole. And lastly, we're going to look at Hamlet, which is one of William Shakespeare's greatest tragedies. It is about Prince Hamlet of Denmark seeking revenge on his uncle Claudius for supposedly murdering his father, marrying his mother, and also stealing the throne. So 3 pretty big things to be mad about. And what does Hamlet do to combat this? Instead of acknowledging his own emotions and maybe talking to his mom about the situation, he decides to fool Claudius by putting on an antic disposition that he has gone mad, so that he can murder Claudius when he most underestimates him. So, to confirm that Claudius is really guilty, because Hamlet did only figure out that Claudius murdered his dad from his dad's ghost. So, Hamlet tries to confirm that this news is true by putting on a play within a play that represents Hamlet's father's murder. And he observes Claudius's response, which is guilty, and then he tries to move forward with his attempted murder of his uncle. So, the result is that throughout Hamlet's poor emotional maturity and lack of communication, and this entire act he's been putting on, his girlfriend actually commits suicide, partially because Hamlet accidentally murdered her dad, but also in part because of the way Hamlet was treating her and the way he was letting his emotional turmoil flood into her, and he was really taking his anger out on her. And then the truly tragic ending is when all the characters somewhat accidentally or purposely murder each other, ending in tragedy. His uncle attempts to kill Hamlet. Hamlet attempts to kill Laertes, Ophelia's brother, and Claudius. And Hamlet's mother drinks the poison by accident, which is meant for Hamlet, which I believe she did purposely based on her guilt for the entire situation. So, how did Hamlet impact my thinking? Well, first of all, it has allowed me to think much more holistically and objectively about situations and really look at where other people are coming from. So, for example, in Hamlet, his mother and his uncle aren't really aware of his emotional state, and the result of their lack of communication, is the death of everyone. So this has really taught me the importance of emphasizing and acknowledging what other people may be feeling and communicating with them about it. So it's allowed me to think in a more aware and observed state of mind. And another way it's impacted my thinking is my ability to read and interpret things below the surface. So looking at a lot of lines in Hamlet, when I first read them, I was really confused on what the character was trying to say. But after breaking down the sentence into those smaller metaphors, I was really able to learn the exact purpose and that literary device that the author was using. And this is something that can change my thinking in my everyday life, because a lot of times people say things that are passive aggressive, or people don't say what they really mean. But if I use those literary analysis skills, I can kind of break down what they're saying and use the tone and the mood of their voice to discern what it is that people are really feeling. And then moving them to the exact skills that I've learned from Hamlet, I first want to mention my reading and comprehension skills, and then I'm going to talk about how it's developed my ability to interpret those literary elements, and then also my communication and oral reading skills. So firstly, Hamlet allowed me to break down things more complex, more comprehend. The three skills I developed from Hamlet were my reading and comprehension skills, my ability to interpret literary devices, and my oral communication skills. So first, I learned how to read more comprehensively by breaking down the long monologues in poetry into simple metaphors and identifying those literary devices so that I could analyze what the characters were really saying. So in that long monologue that Claudius had in scene 1, I was able to break down what he was saying, because at first glance I didn't really understand. But then I learned that he was talking about how he was sad about the past King Hamlet's death, and he was happy about his remarriage with the queen. This is what he was saying to all of Denmark, mind you. And he said that the reason for marrying Gertrude was to protect Denmark and keep it strong. When really, the dramatic irony is that we as the audience know his true motive, which was killing Hamlet so that he could marry Gertrude and to take over the throne. Next, I learned how to interpret literary elements by really searching for them in the text and seeing if they match the definition of the element that I was looking for and those definitions that I learned in the beginning of the course. So for instance, one line, "For murder, though it have no tongue, will speak, with most miraculous organ." This was a line from Act 2, Scene 2, where Hamlet mentioned that murder is a miraculous organ. So although it cannot speak, it is really something that can have devastating or really strong consequences or benefits for him. And the literary device here is actually personification. So I learned this by using those definitions that I already knew and being able to match them with the words used in the quote. So for this one, it says that murder, though it have no tongue, will speak. So it's personifying murder. And then lastly, I developed my communication and oral skills by learning to pronounce Old Proper English and reading those long, difficult poems out loud as a class while I was acting as Claudius in scene 2. So to sum everything up, I really enjoyed reading If, Crucible, and Hamlet, and I've learned to think more critically and objectively as a result. As well as this, I've really developed my literary skills, such as reading comprehension, oral presentation skills, and most importantly, my literary analysis. I've learned how to use historical, abstract, and thematic context to discern the true purpose and the true message of a literary work, which I've been able to apply in my own essays throughout the class and use to develop my own thinking and reading skills.